In 2025, Israel is once again surrounded by conflict. Yet instead of seeing its economy collapse, its GDP per person has climbed to around $55,000, placing it among the wealthiest nations in the world. How does a country under constant security threats continue rising while others in conflict tend to sink? Three forces define the answer: U.S. financial and diplomatic backing, a defense and cybersecurity sector that earns billions, and a society balancing growth with sharp demographic pressures. In fact, just last year, Israel set a record with $14.7 billion in defense exports. War usually destroys economies. Here, the opposite has happened. Why Israel's wealth is so surprising? That's what makes the question so striking. For most countries, prolonged conflict is a recipe for poverty, not prosperity. Wars usually dismantle economies. Industries stall because workers are conscripted or displaced. Currencies lose value as governments print money to cover spiraling defense budgets. Foreign capital retreats, businesses shrink, and rebuilding takes years, even decades, after fighting ends. In short, the standard pattern is contraction and hardship. Israel's path diverges sharply from that pattern. By 2025, its economy produces about $55,000 in wealth per person, with IMF and World Bank estimates placing it somewhere in the low to mid $50,000 range. That puts its living standards on par with developed European nations such as France and the UK, an outcome few would expect from a state repeatedly drawn into crises. While Lebanon, Iraq, and other neighbors saw sustained economic decline after years of fighting, Israel steadily climbed into OECD territory. The paradox is that instead of collapsing under the weight of conflict, this small country managed to channel instability into a long-term footing for growth. This isn't simply luck or a temporary side effect of regional volatility. Israel deliberately built a system where military needs and economic activity reinforce each other rather than compete. Defense research, skilled labor shaped through universal service, and an innovation-driven private sector together created an environment where war pressures do not erase prosperity. Yes, consumer demand dips in moments of crisis, and foreign investors sometimes hesitate, but the overall trajectory remains positive because the entire economy has been engineered for resilience. That leaves the real puzzle: what forces allow Israel to bend these economic rules when so many other nations cannot? One answer lies beyond its borders. For decades, an external partnership has reshaped Israel's ability to grow under pressure, ensuring that the usual financial penalties of conflict rarely strike as hard as they do elsewhere. Without that support, the story of Israel's wealth might look very different. The U.S. partnership Shield and Lever. Since the late 1960s, Israel has drawn on decades of American partnership in the form of military and economic support, an arrangement that has totaled well over $260 billion. Depending on how you calculate inflation, some estimates place the cumulative figure closer to $320 billion. Few nations have ever received such a consistent and large-scale pipeline of assistance, and the reliability of that aid is as important as the headline dollar figure. Unlike countries that must constantly balance wartime budgets under extreme stress, Israel enters each year knowing that a large portion of its defense costs will be handled externally. Most of the modern allotment comes through military channels, with the 2016 Memorandum of Understanding setting foreign military financing at $3.8 billion annually, supplemented by separate appropriations for missile defense initiatives. For a country facing recurring conflict, that structure transforms both its budgeting and its strategic choices. This arrangement shifts Israel's economic options in ways few other wartime states experience. A sudden escalation in a typical conflict-driven economy means borrowing heavily, issuing new currency, or cutting basic services to cover military bills. In Israel's case, Washington underwrites much of the defense purchase program and co-finances development projects. Instead of draining national coffers, those funds cover fighter aircraft contracts, missile systems, and advanced research programs jointly run with American firms. Freed from carrying those costs alone, Israel can keep investing domestically in areas like education, infrastructure, and high-tech industries. The economy is not locked into perpetual crisis mode. It has room to plan strategically. The partnership, however, is not measured only in dollar flows. The second layer is political. Israel lives in a region where hostile votes at the United Nations or sanctions campaigns could at any moment endanger access to global markets. Here again, consistent U.S. influence changes the calculation. Washington's use of diplomatic weight and veto power has often stopped attempts to impose broad restrictions that would otherwise disrupt trade or foreign investment. This diplomatic umbrella is vital to sectors that lean heavily on exports and outside capital. For firms deciding whether to sign contracts or inject billions into Israeli companies, the knowledge that the United States will generally block measures threatening those activities becomes a decisive reassurance. That political cover is often as valuable to investors as the aid dollars themselves. If such protection were lacking, the risks would look very different. Just one sanctions regime could shrink Israel's defense exports dramatically. Foreign venture capital might pull back, spooked by legal uncertainty or the chance of being cut out of markets. Pension funds and institutional investors might rule out involvement entirely. In that environment, Israel's startup nation brand would carry far less weight, especially during spikes of violence. Instead of a rush of capital flowing in, global partners would hesitate or take their money elsewhere. U.S. backing doesn't guarantee immunity from downturns, but it reliably lowers the ceiling on how bad those downturns get. For companies and funds, that conditional stability is enough to keep the long-term commitments coming. When you compare this to other states under heavy security pressures, the difference in trajectory stands out. Lebanon's financial powerhouse in Beirut largely unraveled once regional conflict and instability stripped away foreign confidence. Iraq and Iran, both oil producers capable of great wealth, saw their prospects diminish sharply under decades of sanctions. Israel's alignment with Washington has created an unusually secure environment in which capital treats rockets or regional flare-ups as long-term irritations rather than existential risks. Investors in Silicon Valley or European capitals monitor the headlines, but with U.S. protection in place, they rarely feel compelled to abandon their positions. That acceptance of risk, tempered by American guarantees, is part of the foundation supporting Israel's economic resilience. It is crucial to stress, though, that this external support does not directly generate Israel's economic innovations. Aid does not invent new agricultural technology or design artificial intelligence systems. Those outcomes depend on domestic institutions and workers. What U.S. assistance does is amplify the environment in which those innovations can thrive. Constant backing ensures that an escalation won't wipe out the financial system or shut down trade routes overnight. By flattening the extremes of economic volatility, American influence effectively magnifies the payoff from each Israeli innovation, making bold experiments and aggressive growth strategies viable even in wartime conditions. This effect is most visible when foreign investors assess risk. In most countries under conflict, venture capital would hesitate during flare-ups, unwilling to stake millions on a territory that might face embargoes. In Israel's case, those investments rarely stop. Deals continue to be signed for cybersecurity companies linked to military units or agricultural firms pioneering water-saving technologies. For these investors, Washington's political guarantee acts as a stabilizer. They may accept the day-to-day volatility precisely because they believe larger geopolitical barriers will not suddenly close the economy off from the world. The alliance extends into operational cooperation as well. Joint military projects, such as the development of layered missile defense systems, use American financing and expertise to multiply Israeli capacity. These arrangements let Israel field advanced technologies at lower costs, while also integrating the lessons from those projects into civilian industry. The cycle is efficient. A defense program bankrolled in part by the alliance creates breakthroughs, and those breakthroughs often migrate into commercial markets like cyber protection or communications. Without a great power partnership underwriting the development risk, building these systems at scale would simply be cost-prohibitive. U.S. assistance also shapes expectations in subtler ways. Domestic companies inside Israel react differently to escalations because they, too, expect recovery. That expectation is based on experience. Each downturn in recent history has been cushioned by external backing, with markets stabilizing faster than outside observers predict. The psychological stability, businesses assuming they will ride out turmoil, reduces the kind of panic selling or sudden capital flight that amplifies recessions elsewhere. Markets respond not just to fundamentals but to perceptions, and the knowledge of long-term American partnership shifts those perceptions in Israel's favor. This ongoing relationship influences global credit ratings as well. International agencies assess the likelihood of repayment not only by reviewing tax bases or growth rates, but also by factoring in geopolitical alignments. Knowing that the world's largest economy has repeatedly committed to Israel's financial and military survival reassures creditors. The result is easier access to affordable borrowing, even when conflicts are acute. In contrast, isolated states under sanctions often face skyrocketing rates or find themselves frozen out of lending altogether. For Israel, the combination of resilient fundamentals and reinforced trust keeps infrastructure, education, and research projects funded even under stress. Broadly speaking, more than 50 years of consistent cooperation has built two interconnected safety nets. On one side, military and economic assistance absorbs costs that would otherwise overwhelm a small nation engaged in near-permanent conflict. On the other, diplomatic cover keeps trade lanes open and capital flowing. Together, these create a unique shield that allows industries, whether a Tel Aviv startup, a Negev farm, or a Haifa technology lab, to function inside a more stable framework than external conditions would predict. For a country so often at the center of conflict, the impact of that arrangement cannot be overstated. Yet while this support structure is critical, it does not fully explain how Israel turns continual insecurity into a source of growth. Dollars and diplomatic backing set the stage, but the next question is how specific industries have transformed danger itself into an economic asset. Defense technology turning threats into exports. A key example of this transformation is Israel's defense technology industry, where the demands of survival have become the foundations of a thriving export market. What in most countries ends as an enormous cost has, in Israel's case, been reshaped into a sector generating steady streams of foreign revenue. By 2024, the Ministry of Defense reported record export contracts worth $14.7 billion, with totals in the 2024-25 period hovering around $15 billion. For a country of roughly 9 million people, that figure signals how central arms and security technologies have become to the economy, lifting Israel into the ranks of the world's top defense exporters. The process through which domestic threats evolve into commercial products follows a direct pipeline. An urgent need generates experimentation, that experimentation produces a working prototype, and once tested under real conditions, the system is adapted into an export good. Take missile defense. The Iron Dome system began as a desperate project designed to shield cities from rockets. After proving reliable in combat, it became a flagship export, sought after by countries as diverse as the United States, India, and several NATO members. Here the logic is consistent. The state's survival requirements yield solutions that, when scaled, become attractive to other militaries. Recent data shows a further evolution in this market. In 2022 and 2023, exports of rockets, missiles, and air defense systems surged to dominate the portfolio, while unmanned aerial vehicles, which once took a larger share, declined proportionally. That shift illustrates how Israel monetizes exactly the types of threats it faces most often. As rocket salvos from Gaza or southern Lebanon grew frequent, producers refined interception technologies. Those improvements not only protected Israeli civilians, but also created hardware other nations were eager to purchase. The balance of Israel's export composition reflects this cycle of need translating directly into trade. The role of artificial intelligence inside these systems underscores another feature of the industry. Israeli missile defenses are not just hardware launchers. They incorporate software that weighs trajectories, calculates probability of impact, and selects which incoming threats merit interception. Sophisticated algorithms reduce unnecessary launches, conserving expensive missiles. This efficiency principle is then bundled into the export package. Buyers understand they are acquiring not only physical interceptors, but also embedded predictive systems that maximize effectiveness. Likewise, drones with AI-enhanced navigation and targeting, first perfected for border patrols, are adapted into global sales lines, from reconnaissance platforms to armed UAVs. Civilian spin-offs from this research deepen the impact. Cybersecurity is the clearest example, where engineers protecting military communication links against constant intrusion developed techniques that later migrated into public markets. Encryption advances, anomaly detection tools, and monitoring frameworks, originating in defense labs, underpin products now installed in banks, airlines, and hospitals worldwide. This explains why Israel became a global hub for cybersecurity firms. War-borne techniques translated into commercial systems millions of people rely on daily. Next to cyber, surveillance is another area where military platforms evolved into policing and border control technologies. Contracts for such systems have expanded to clients from North America to Southeast Asia, showing how once local innovations transformed into valued international commodities. This deliberate integration between military and economy explains why defense exports feed the broader system, rather than remain isolated. Israel Aerospace Industries, Rafael Advanced Defense Systems, and Elbit Systems rank among the country's largest employers, sustaining tens of thousands of jobs. Their production chains include subcontractors, local tech startups, and collaboration with multinational corporations. Crucially, foreign buyers value the combat-proven status attached to these systems. Unlike weapons developed in countries with long procurement cycles and limited battlefield use, Israeli platforms are refined under continuous pressure. They are seen as credible, tested against real-world attacks rather than only simulated environments. This credibility strengthens Israel's position in the global defense market. Nations purchasing Israeli systems perceive them as high-value solutions with clear records. Rather than devoting years to hypothetical evaluation, buyers can examine logged performance from active conflicts. In economic terms, this accelerates the sales pipeline and cements Israel's role as a supplier of timely, battle-tested technologies. The benefits extend well beyond sales. Export contracts inject hard currency, stabilizing Israel's balance of payments. They attract joint ventures with foreign firms, spreading Israel's design influence across multinational supply chains. Each deal helps bind Israel deeper into global industrial and scientific networks. Defense contracts thereby not only bolster employment, but also cultivate long-term integration with international partners. In 2024 alone, deals spanned Europe, Asia, and Latin America, showing how widely Israeli systems now circulate. Economically, this model provides resilience. Each escalation creates disruption, but also sparks new problem-solving. Analysts often describe Israel's economy as unusually adaptive. This is because repeated crises continuously generate new military challenges: cheap drones, cyber-sabotage, improvised rockets that companies solve, export, and scale into foreign contracts. Where conventional theory would predict spiraling costs, Israel manages to convert those costs back into revenue. The structure of this model relies on the dual role of government and private enterprise. Military demand forms the guaranteed initial market. Private firms then adapt each order into slightly altered forms designed for external buyers. The dependence of local industry on that first government commission cannot be overstated. It de-risks development, ensuring prototypes reach scale. Yet once systems are upgraded into exportable models, firms capture profits abroad. This coupling of state necessity with business opportunity has few parallels. Some argue the morality of such a system is questionable, that conflict should not be a driver of profit. But in pure economic terms, Israel's defense industry has shown how sustained insecurity can be transformed into capital. Each major conflict produces new weapon classes, protection systems, or digital solutions, which in turn travel wider globally. In 2024, Israel sat alongside powers like France, Russia, and the United States in annual defense export rankings, a remarkable achievement for a small state. The scale of this industry matters at home as well. Defense firms provide stable, high-wage jobs and continuous streams of tax revenue. In a global sense, Israel's economy would look quite different without these contributions. The $14–15 billion in annual defense exports represent not just weapons sales, but the foundation of several of the country's most influential companies. Firms such as Elbit and IAI rank among the top global defense contractors, but also operate as multi-purpose industrial hubs. Their innovations spin off into commercial planes, satellites, and medical devices, showing how an economy built around conflict also feeds civilian sectors. This is the payoff. A nation that should by all logic struggle under the cost of permanent defense has leveraged those same costs into one of its central export pillars. Israel is now firmly among the leading arms exporters worldwide, with defense serving as both protector and economic engine. Few other countries integrate survival and profit to the same degree, and this integration explains much of Israel's resilience in hostile circumstances. But defense hardware is no longer the only field where these patterns appear. In recent years, the battlefield has expanded into areas visible not on city streets, but inside networks and data streams. And in that domain, Israel has again turned necessity into influence. AI and cybersecurity, the new battlefield for growth. Wars in the 21st century are increasingly fought through data, algorithms, and digital networks rather than just tanks or aircraft. This shift is already transforming both security and economics, and Israel sits near the center of it. Just as earlier conflicts pushed the country to pioneer missile interceptors and surveillance drones, today's pressures have driven a focus on artificial intelligence and cybersecurity. These are no longer peripheral tools, they form the backbone of modern defense. Heavy weapons still matter, but without advanced software to process threats, coordinate responses, and defend networks, even the most sophisticated systems lose effectiveness. Israel's advantage lies in having embedded AI and cyber capabilities directly into its national defense and commercial sectors. AI has become a fundamental layer in Israeli military operations. Missile defense batteries now integrate predictive software that tracks launches, calculates trajectories in seconds, and assigns interceptors with minimal waste. Surveillance platforms rely on algorithms to scan endless feeds of visual and electronic data, flagging anomalies that human analysts would miss. While these tools are built for defense, their software-driven nature makes them highly adaptable for export. Constant refinements, distributed through updates, allow buyers abroad to acquire systems that improve over time, making Israel's product line appealing for militaries seeking tested and scalable solutions. Drones offer another clear example. Israeli industries have developed a range of autonomous and semi-autonomous models. Some focus on long-duration reconnaissance, staying airborne over contested areas and transmitting information without requiring constant human control. Others carry strike capabilities, guided in part by AI-assisted targeting systems that reduce reliance on real-time piloting. Although humans remain responsible for ultimate decisions, the degree of machine support has expanded rapidly. These platforms have become attractive on the global market, with buyers across Europe, Asia, and the Americas seeking cost-effective drones backed by battlefield experience. Each sale not only delivers revenue, but also reinforces Israel's position as a leader in intelligent unmanned systems. Cybersecurity has created perhaps an even larger economic ripple. For decades, Israeli networks have been subjected to near-constant attacks from both state actors and independent groups. Defending against these pressures led to the rise of specialized military intelligence units, most prominently Unit 8200. The unit's alumni have played an outsized role in shaping the private sector. Many of the country's top cyber entrepreneurs come directly from this training pipeline, entering civilian life with operational experience that is difficult to replicate in academic programs. This flow of talent explains why such a small state has generated a disproportionate share of the world's cybersecurity firms and technologies. The trajectory of companies born out of this environment illustrates the pattern. Check Point, which became a global leader in network security, began with technology linked to defense challenges and later found applications across governments, corporations, and financial institutions. Similar stories repeat with dozens of firms. Small teams of veterans build solutions first tested under military pressure, then adapt them into commercial products for international markets. Venture capital follows this pattern because investors recognize that these founders have already worked against some of the most complex adversaries in the world, providing credibility that accelerates growth. The dual role of these technologies, domestic survival and international commerce, amplifies their importance. Inside Israel, AI-driven defense systems and network protection tools form the backbone of resilience against routine attacks. Outside its borders, these same technologies provide scalable exports across every sector that depends on digital infrastructure. Global demand is nearly universal. Banks, hospitals, airlines, and governments all require secure networks, making the customer base far broader than that of traditional defense hardware. This universality turns niche solutions into mass-market products, extending Israel's economic reach. Software-focused industries also operate under different economic dynamics than hardware-heavy sectors like arms manufacturing. A missile defense battery may cost billions and take years to complete, but a cybersecurity platform can be replicated and deployed worldwide at comparatively low marginal cost. This scalability makes profits grow rapidly once a core product proves effective. It also lowers entry barriers for new firms. Former intelligence officers can leave service and within a few years run startups valued at hundreds of millions, precisely because their outputs are digital solutions rather than heavy machinery. In this way, Israel's innovation cycle is faster, cheaper, and more adaptive than in many other countries.